Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Apalachicola-Chattahoochee-Flint River Basin Drought and Water webinar for the month of March. My name is Rachel McGuire, and I'm with the Auburn University Water Resources Center located in Auburn, Alabama. If you're new to the webinar, we'll have time for comments, questions, and discussion at the end after our last speaker. You can also use the question box or the raise your hand tool on the GoToWebinar tool panel throughout the webinar. We will get to your questions at the end. I also want to point out that our April webinar that was scheduled for April 26th has been canceled due to its concurrence with the ACF Water Conference, which I'll also give a little more information on towards the end of the webinar. Today's speakers will be David Zierden of the Florida State Climate Office at Florida State University. We have Michael Harper of the Alabama Office of Water Resources. We have Paul Ankhorn of the USGS South Atlantic Water Science Center, Jody Juan of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Mobile District, and Jeff Dober of the National Weather Service Southeast River Forecast Center. Now I'll turn it over to our first speaker, David, when you are ready.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot, Rachel. And I want to start off this webinar by humbling myself a little bit. Being in weather and climate forecasting, the opportunities to be humbled are seemingly endless. And that certainly happened last month when one of my main points was that we were on the cusp of a developing drought. And this was really, NIDIS is all about these early warning systems. This was an early warning. And that held true for another week or so. But then we got into this very active pattern and a southern storm track, and we've just seen multiple rounds of storminess and rainfall over the southeast over the past 2 weeks or more. So this week is no exception. Right now, we're looking at a severe weather threat for the deep south, where we see parts of Louisiana and Mississippi are actually shown in the convective outlook is having a moderate threat for tornadoes and severe weather. And we saw some of that severe weather in Texas yesterday, and it does look like there are the storms are starting to become more active this afternoon, and there have been tornado warnings in Mississippi just recently. So that's the threat that's going on today, but it's going to be multiple days of severe threat. And on the bottom, we see the forecast for Wednesday into Thursday morning, where that threat lightens up a little bit, but it moves further east and really impacts Alabama, Georgia, and the ACF Basin. And over on the right is just the 500 millibar analysis from this morning, showing a very vigorous low pressure system moving east across the southern United States. And also you'll notice the very strong upper level winds that are giving the support for these severe thunderstorms, tornadic activity, along with plentiful Gulf moisture and instability. So that's kind of what we're looking at for the past 2 days. And along with this will also come the possibility of flooding rainfall along parts of the deep south. So we'll go to the next slide and start concentrating on drought. And here I show the US Drought Monitor for the Southeast, both from last month and the current depiction from last week. And we do see that last month there was a large area of Florida and South Georgia designated as abnormally dry, but only a couple little small pockets of moderate drought. Well, as the weeks progressed, drought did intensify across the southeast, where as of last week, we had a fairly large swath of moderate drought across the Florida Panhandle, the lower ACF Basin, and southeast Georgia, and then further down the Florida Peninsula also. But this product came out last Thursday, and the cutoff for any rainfall data going into this product is actually Tuesday morning. So it was almost obsolete by the time it got released last week, and we're going to look for pretty dramatic improvement across the lower ACF when this week's Drought Monitor comes out. So we'll go ahead to the next slide. This is certainly a more current product. It's the Lawn and Garden Moisture Index from University of Alabama, Huntsville. And it really shows the impact of these recent rounds of rainfall across the Florida Panhandle and the Big Bend, North Florida, South Georgia, South Alabama, all very moist with this lawn and garden index. It extends up through the entire state of Alabama, where northern Alabama has been running above normal with precipitation for the last several months. So the lawn and garden index shows great improvement. There's still some pockets of drought down in South Florida and also along coastal South Carolina and North Carolina. So here's one thing I want to show, a disconnect. And I told you how that the US Drought Monitor was almost outdated by the time it was released last Thursday. This is a map from the ACF dashboard of real-time or daily stream flows across the Southeast. And what really sticks out are these blue dots where stream flows are running at over 90% of historical values. However, these stream flows are located in areas where it's D1 or moderate drought or D0 abnormally dry. So looking at daily stream flows, there's a little bit of a disconnect. Now, there is some caution. I know I don't want to steal Paul Ancorn's thunder, but for smaller rivers and catchments, daily stream flows might be a little misleading as they rise quickly, but they fall just as quickly. So it's often good to look at 7-day average or 28 average stream flows rather than daily. But this does show a disconnect between the drought monitor and current conditions. So on the next slide, we'll start taking a look at recent rainfall. And these are the radar estimates from the last 7 days or week, which had a couple different rain systems move through. And we see all the areas colored in yellow received at least 2 inches of rainfall. And that includes the entire Florida Panhandle, South Georgia, and most of the state of Alabama. We also see pockets in the Florida Panhandle of 5, 6, even one small area of 10 inches or more just in the last 7 days. So really had a kind of been in a rainy cycle and frequent heavy rainfall across North Florida, lesser amounts across the Florida Peninsula and as we get into North Georgia. On the next slide, we'll take a little further back at precipitation totals for the last 30 days. And now we see things really sticking out. We see the much above normal rainfall across all of North Alabama, even pretty widespread pockets of 10 inches or more in the last 30 days. As we move down the states of Alabama and Georgia, we see lesser amounts in the middle ACF basin, but still normal to above normal. And then again, we see heavy amounts along North Florida and the Florida Panhandle. Again, some pockets of 10 inches or more just in the last 30 days. On the next slide, we'll take a look even further back, and these are 90-day precipitation, and these are departures from normal rather than actual amounts this time. But there you can really see how much above normal northern Alabama has been. But if we look back over 90 days, southern Alabama, southern Georgia, kind of the lower or the middle ACF basin is still running a little bit behind climatology. So we'll start taking a look ahead on the next slide. And this is the 7-day quantitative precipitation forecast from the National Weather Service. And we see very heavy rainfall amounts associated with this current system along northern Mississippi, northwest Alabama, into Louisiana and such. So really heavy amounts of 5 to 7 inches forecasted for these areas. As we get a little further east into the ACF basin, forecasted amounts are not as high in the 1 to 2 inch range, but also the Florida Panhandle looks to be on tap for some more heavy rainfall from this system also. So kind of the active pattern certainly continues. Yeah, on the next slide, we'll take a little, start looking a little further out, and what's the state of the Pacific Ocean. And it looks like this current La Nina is finally starting to weaken a little bit. Still fairly cold waters in the central Pacific Ocean, and the subsurface ocean temperatures still show some support for continued La Nina conditions. But also we see a pretty significant warming off the coast of South America. So it looks like we might be starting to see the demise of La Nina conditions, but that'll take some time. So it's still to be a player for the next month or two for sure. And on the next slide, we'll take a look at the current forecast, or just a review of the typical La Nina impacts, which we saw for most of the winter until these past few weeks where we've had this southerly storm track. But also looking at the bottom two graphics, we see that the impacts for the lower ACF Basin, the northern Gulf Coast, and state of Florida are really much stronger in March than in April, when we start to warm up and see typical spring-like weather conditions. So regardless of how quickly this La Nina fades, or if it does, it still loses its influence as we get into the late spring and summer months. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at the official forecast, and we see that there's over a 90% chance of La Nina conditions continuing through the March, April, May season, that second graph on the left. But as we get into the summer, June, July, August, they're still forecasting a 50% chance of continued La Nina conditions. May or may not be a little over aggressive, especially when we look at the different model projections over on the right. They seem to be forming a consensus to return to neutral conditions as we get into the summertime, May, June, July, June, July, and August. So the consensus is kind of more of a return to neutral conditions, looking at just the models. So with that in mind, we'll take a look at the seasonal forecast for the next 3 months from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center. And very similar to what we've seen all winter long, a very strong forecast for above normal temperatures across the entire southern United States, certainly extending into the ACF Basin. But over on the right, we now see that the precipitation outlook is more along the lines of equal chances of above, below, or near normal. So the precipitation forecast is certainly not as strong as we saw during the winter when we were more under the influence of La Nina conditions. So we'll go to the next slide, and this is the seasonal drought outlook, which luckily for us was updated just last week on March 17th. So it did reflect some of the recent rainfall we've seen across the deep south and the ACF Basin. And now all the areas that were designated as moderate drought, or D1, are now forecast in the green, like drought removal is likely as we continue this active pattern, and certainly in Florida as we get into the summer rainy season. So that's some good news from the seasonal drought outlook. So with that, I'll go ahead and summarize. The active weather pattern we've seen is still in place this week. High threat of severe weather and flooding in the deep south. The U.S. Drought Monitor shows degradation across South Georgia, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle, but is really lagging behind the impact of recent rainfall systems, and we'll see some correction of that this week. Above normal rainfall, as we've seen over much of the lower ACF Basin in the last 30 days, conditions improving rapidly. There is still below normal rainfall over the middle and parts of the lower ACF at 90 days out, but much above normal for northern Alabama and the upper basin. La Nina advisory does continue, over a 90% chance it lasts into the spring and 50% into June and July. The CPC seasonal forecast still heavily favors above normal temperatures, but now we're down to equal chances for rainfall here in the ACF Basin. And as the drought outlook showed, drought development is less likely now than it was a month ago in the lower ACF Basin.
Thank you, David. Now I'll turn it over to Michael Harper with the State of Alabama input.
Thank you, Rachel. They did a good job of summing up everything there, so I don't have a whole lot more to add. Showed the drought monitor here for the state of Alabama for last week, and like you said, it was pretty much outdated before it got released due to the onslaught of rain that we had. You can go ahead to the next slide. And so current declaration for state of Alabama still shows no drought for any counties. Was last updated in May of last year. You go ahead. Just a reminder, we keep a lot of up-to-date drought information on our website. If you're interested in going to that, you can go to water.alabama.gov and click on the drought page and take you to the links of all that information that's available. So in summary, the upper 2/3 of the state remain drought-free. And then we have some D1 that's currently showing up in the southern part of the state. It is note that some of that area got upwards of 4 to some cases. Some of the Cocoa Ross data showing 6 inches of rainfall in parts of the lower ACF in Alabama. So I do expect the drought monitor to be significantly different. And then with the rain coming in tonight and tomorrow with this upcoming storm system, even more changes the following week. We're continuing to monitor conditions. And if you go ahead and go to the next slide, we have a drought meeting scheduled, or monitoring and monitoring group is a meeting on Tuesday, March 29th at 1 o'clock. If you're interested in this and want to participate, just send us an email and we'll get anybody on the email listserv for this so that you'll get notifications.
Thank you, Michael. And now I'll turn it over to Paul Inkhorn with our Streamflows and groundwater conditions. When you're ready, Paul.
All right, thank you, Rachel. So yeah, we'll begin by looking at the current conditions across the ACF Basin and the border southeast. You'll see these are our long-term monitoring stations, and the color coding is the real-time flow relative to its daily average. So the image on the right is what's current conditions, and you can see pretty much across the whole basin, flows are typically in the normal range there, with a few stations moving further, south through the basin, picking up more flow, and currently ranking is above normal. So yeah, you can see, as David pointed out, the overlay of the drought monitor D0 and D3 is lagging a little bit, as like I said, David pointed out, with recent precip that should change. So we'll move to the next slide. And this shows our below normal 7-day average stream flow. So this is an indication of hydrologic drought. And so gauges are showing, the basin to be drought free, which we all know that at this point. So conditions are in the normal range for the 7-day average stream flow. Okay, next slide. So we're switching here to, this is the 28-day average. So this is kind of a lagging indicator. And it shows the 28-day averaged flow over the previous 28 days. So what we're seeing further in the southern portion of the basin, there are some lower flows below normal, and that is really mixing well with the drought monitor layers that we have there. So the D1, which is minor drought, is backed up by that 28-day average flow. But of course, with that being a lagging indicator, it's not really having a lot of influence of the past rain, and of course the rain is going to move through in the next 48 hours. So I expect a lot of these stations would move into the green, which is showing normal conditions. And as you move further up the basin, conditions are right in the normal range, with a couple of stations flowing into Lanier, which are showing above normal. So the next slide, we'll take a look at Chattahoochee River near Cornelia. Again, this is 28-day average stream flow, which is all accessible from the NIDIS drought dashboard. So you click on that station there and go to the next slide, and that will take you to the real-time data for that station. Again, we're at Chattahoochee at Cornelia, so this is one of the main inflows to Lanier. And then I went ahead and toggled that button down there on the right, lower right, which compares current flow to last year. So you can see right now we're about 10% less discharge in real time as what we were showing last year. So that's the 7-day, and then on the right, that's the traditional 28-day average that I've been showing for the past 4 or 5 years here. So we all know that the black line there is the 28-day moving average, if you will. So you can see there was a pretty good decline after our last webinar. Flow moved out of the above normal, but it remained in the normal range, and it's upticked slightly for the past 14 days, but we're right at around the 50th percentile there. So that shows the same trend for the Chestatee as well, which is the second main tributary into Lanier. Okay, the next slide, we'll switch over to groundwater. So these are our real-time groundwater wells, and pretty much across the whole ACF, we're looking at a majority of wells in the normal range, with a few reporting below normal and 1 or 2 showing above normal. We typically look at those 2 circled stations there, which are our long-term indicators. So this is Miller County, and you can see a little fluctuation, but over the past few days, Miller County has been increasing, but all of the data showing, at least for the last 2 months, has been in the normal range. So we look pretty good there. Next slide is the Doherty County, and again, last couple of months we've seen some, trending down, which is typically the reverse of what we usually see, which is sort of an increase. But with that said, data is still ranking in the normal range, so plenty of groundwater. All right, so just I'll summarize here. Real-time stream flow for the basin currently ranked from much above normal to a few stations showing below normal range. 7-day average stream flow is currently ranking as normal. 28-day average stream flow for the Chattahoochee River currently in the above normal, with a few in the below normal range. And then the same for the Flint River, we're showing conditions normal to below normal. And then real-time groundwater levels currently ranked in the normal range. All right, Rachel, that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Now I'll turn it over to Jody with our ACF reservoir conditions.
Hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. So beginning at the top of the ACF, we have Lake Lanier or Beaufort Dam. Currently, pool elevations are riding pretty high given the past couple of rainstorms, and we're slowly making our way back to our winter pool elevation. Current conditions downstream prevent us from really discharging large amounts of water, so we're just gonna continue to hold it until we get those lower basins in a good place currently. Not only that, we do have our refill period coming up beginning May 15th, as you guys can see on these graphs, and we're gonna try to hold it a little bit above so we have water to help get to the top of conservation. Next slide, please. Moving down to the ACF Basin, we have West Point. So currently West Point is still pretty high given downstream conditions are slightly elevated. So we don't want to impact any more to those downstream conditions. So we're currently holding it pretty high. We're currently in our refill period right now. And we're gonna ride that median line curve right up to refill. Next slide, please. Walter F. George is one of our main lower projects that we were worried about due to the numerous rain events that occurred in this past month. So currently we are attempting to get back down to 188, which is our winter pool elevation. And we're going to make that transition really slow, given that we have a lot of other restrictions at Woodruff. And we need a little bit of water to help out with that. Sorry, if you could go back one more. Yeah, thank you. Refill period is going to begin May 1st, and that's going to be about in a month or so. So we're just going to hopefully ride that right up to topical conservation. Next slide, please. And lastly, Jim Woodruff, as y'all can see here, we hit some pretty high flows at Jim Woodruff with this past rain event, and currently we are trying to ramp down and make some storage space in order to accommodate it for tomorrow's event. So currently we're discharging about 45 to 47,000 at the moment, just to make some of that storage space available once the rain occurs. Currently we're supporting navigation as well as fish spawn operations at this project. They both begin around March 1st. And so we are currently meeting those requirements. Next slide, please. Overall, we're still in zone 1, in composite zone 1, and our composite conservation is right at the top there. And we'll continue being in the top for the next 5 weeks or so. Next slide. Alrighty.
Okay, thank you, Jody. Now I'll turn it over to Jeff Jober with our Streamflow forecast.
Alrighty, thank you, Rachel, and good afternoon, everybody. Here we'll start off with our 10-day probabilistic river forecast guidance, and we'll start here at the top at Vinings. As you can see, we did have some high flow with the past rainfall events, but now settling back in. And for the most part, looks like streamflows will stay in check as far as flooding. You can see out there on the 24th, 25th, maybe the probabilistic ensembles showing maybe a outside chance for something, but for the most part, running relatively flat through the next 10 days. If we go to the next slide, going down to Whitesburg, it's pretty much the same theme. Again, for the most part in check. And then we'll go down to the next. And you can see the, the slight bump there with the recent rainfall that we're expecting with the over the next couple of days. And we'll go down, this is actually on the Flint River at Lovejoy. Now we'll go down the lower Flint here at Albany. Again, for the most part, flows falling off from the previous rainfall event we've had over the last week or so. And then finally, going down the Bluntstown on the Apalachicola River, this is dictated for the most part by the releases out of Woodruff, as Jody was talking about. Jody, the Corps in our office were talking this morning. And in fact, we'll probably have at Bluntstown releases that will keep Bluntstown in flood for at least the next few days. And then with the additional rainfall, that may even linger further into the latter half of the week and maybe even the weekend. So releases probably more in the 45,000 range rather than the forecast you see here. And if we go to the next slide, as you can see, we're actually in week 12, and this puts us more or less just on the back edge of the peak stream flow, peak flooding period. But over the next few weeks, we'll start to see the green up occur across the ACF. And typically April is somewhat of a drier month, and you'll see stream flows start to, on average, fall, as well as the potential for flooding fall over the next few weeks as we head through the month of April. Next slide. Here's the current flood conditions and what we're expecting using the expected rainfall over the next 48 hours. And so for the most part, most of our high water is down across South Georgia. and the lower Flint and the lower ACF for the most part. And that would probably be the case even with this event, as most of the heavy rain stays off to the west. But we do have, again, some lingering flows from past rain events that are keeping some of the daily flows high, and some of the rivers close to their bankful stages. And we go to the next slide. So as we look further out into the outlook period for April, we're going to continue with that sort of theme of near normal, getting a regular amount of rainfall events, and with the rainfall events we've had, again, we may be up and down, especially as we go into the 3-month period, but for the most part, we're looking at near normal for April. Even if we get dry weather, the normal stream flows start to fall off. And then if we go to the next slide that shows the 3-day or the 3-month forecast or outlook, we can see the probability pie charts showing the best chances at normal, about a 1 in 2 chance, which is about a 1 in 3 chance of above normal, and a 1 in 5 chance for the most part, 1 in 4 chance at below normal for the ACF for the April, May, and June period as we go into the warm season. And so for a final summary, we're pretty much looking at near normal stream flows. As David pointed out, we're falling out of that La Nina potential, maybe going into neutral conditions, and all the CPC outlooks incorporated in this. And so for the most part, calling for near normal for the 1-month stream flow as well as the 3-month stream flow. And just a reminder for our 10-day forecasts, or our official river stage forecast, there's the links if you'd like to have them. And that's all I had.
Thanks, Jeff. And I just want to bring it to everyone's attention that we will be coming to the end of this webinar series in May. We canceled the April webinar because it is concurrent with the ACF Waters Conference that's being held in Albany. I just put a link in the chat to the ACF Basin Drought and Water dashboard. So moving forward past May, you can find essentially all of this information on the dashboard yourself, as well as a lot of map download tools. So you can have a lot of these figures that you see each month and have become used to seeing. Also, the Southeast Climate Monthly webinar will continue, which will have more regional scale information that you're used to seeing for the basin. So I mentioned the ACF Waters Conference. Registration is currently open. It's April 26th through the 28th and will be hosted on Albany State University's campus. If you have questions, you should contact Gail Cowie. Her email is listed right there. I'll also put it in the chat and include it in our follow-up email that I send each month following this webinar. Gail Cowie is with the Georgia Water Planning and Policy Center at Albany State University. Thank you again to our speakers today, David Zierden, Michael Harper, Paul Ancorn, Jody Juan, and Jeff Dober. Now is the time. If you have any questions or discussion that you'd like to pose, you can either raise your hand or enter in a question directly. I'll be posting a video recording of this webinar within 24 to 48 hours, as well as your summary email. I do not see any questions. You can always contact me if you have any after this webinar. Thank you everyone for being here, and do remember our April webinar is canceled. Have a great day.